You've entered Bookstorm. Your favorite authors are here to dive down deep into their best-selling books. Stay tuned to brave the storm.
Welcome back to Bookstorm Podcast, listeners. I'm your co-host, Kristen Civiletto, and with me is Julia Rose. And we're just thrilled that you're tuning in from 105 countries and territories, all 50 U.S. states. And we know why. It's because we are bringing you the very best authors that are writing today. And today is no exception. We have internationally best-selling author Sophie Hannah. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, we are excited, especially because this book is amazing. I'm going to show our listeners. We're talking today about the last death of the year. And wow, does this entertain? I actually kept staying up until very, very late reading this one. Like I do many books, but this one just kept me turning those pages. It's awesome.
No, I was just going to say, I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Loved it. Loved it. In fact, Julia and I have the privilege of talking about the books, of course, off air. And we both kind of came at it from different angles, which was kind of neat. So I'm sure we'll get into all that. But I'd like to tell our listeners just a little bit about your background because you are very well known for your crime fiction, your psychological thrillers, but our readers love to hear some of those details of things they might not know. So I want to tell them you are a Sunday Times, New York Times, and Amazon Kindle UK #1 bestselling author of crime fiction. You have books that have been published in 49 languages, 51 territories, and you've sold millions of copies of books worldwide. We know why, because again, they are page turners. You're awesome. We are so excited you're on the show. You also write these crime fiction, but contemporary thrillers as well. And Agatha Christie's estate has asked you to continue that amazing franchise. She has many, many memorable characters, but Hercule Poirot, that is one that you have written. How many books in that franchise now?
I've written 5 that have come out already, and The Last Death of the Year is number 6, and that's about to come out.
Number 6, amazing. You are multi-talented. You have a murder mystery musical, The Mystery of Mr. E. It was a feature film in 2023. I know it was on Amazon Prime, Apple TV.
I think it still is. I think it's still on both Amazon Prime and Apple TV. Yeah. And it's also on American public television via the WETA network, and they've syndicated it across the US. So I think last time I checked, close to 600,000 Americans had watched it on their public television, services.
I love it.
That's very exciting for me.
That is very exciting. First of all, here's a cool title, The Mystery of Mr. E. You kind of want to know a little more about this Mr. E, so that's pretty neat.
Exactly. Yes.
Now, you have won many awards. You won the Crime Writers Association Dagger Award. And in 2013, your thriller, The Carrier, won the Crime Thriller of the Year Award.
Yeah, that's right.
Very cool. And you're also a poet. You've been shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Award, which is just incredible standing alone. So the fact that you have this facility between, genres and different ways of expression and writing, that's really neat.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I think to be honest, poetry and crime fiction have a lot in common. They both rely quite heavily on the structure and everything being positioned exactly correctly in relation to everything else. Otherwise, with a poem, it won't have any proper sort of musical quality. And with a crime novel, if everything is not in the right position in relation to everything else, then the plot doesn't work. You have to, if you're going to have a revelation in chapter 32, you need to plant the seeds in chapters 11, 12 and 20, So I think it's an interesting structure that drew me to those 2 genres in particular.
Well, I love that the book that we're talking about today, The Last Death of the Year, there is some critiques of poetry in there that were very humorous, but now I can see where they came from. Now, interestingly, other people know you from other facets of your life. And I thought this was really interesting because you are also a nonfiction writer and you run workshops for other writers. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I do run workshops, but the main thing I do involving other writers is I run a coaching program. For writers or anyone who wants to write, you don't have to be a published writer. You don't even have to be someone who's written anything yet. You just have to want to write or be someone who is writing. And I have this coaching program called Dream Author Coaching, in which I help writers to become as happy and successful as possible within their writing lives and writing identities. And that's been running since 2019, and it's just growing and growing and getting more and more amazing. I just absolutely love it. And the number of writers who have joined the program and then gone on to achieve like massive success, and it's, and so many of them have said that it's changed every aspect of their life, not only their writing lives. So that is one of my obsessions and vocations, really. I mean, I can't imagine not doing that because I just love it so much. I just seem to do a lot of things. I write non-fiction, I coach, I write musicals. I've also got
love it.
family, I've got kids and a dog and a husband, and I'm also an
Well,
obsessive swimmer. Have to swim every day.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Much like one of your characters
Much
in the
like
book.
Catchpool in the last episode. Yeah, exactly. That's totally where that came from.
Well, I love that you have the heart of a teacher, because that also seems like it's applicable to a mystery where we're learning as the reader how to
Yeah.
zero in on clues and put things together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. And
that,
there's also a kind of teacher, well, not teacher, but like a mentor relationship between
Mhm.
Poirot and Catchpool, because Catchpool, unlike the traditional detective novel sidekick, he's not sort of nice but dim. He's actually quite intelligent and quite a good detective himself, but he's nowhere near as good as Poirot. So he's always hoping to kind of learn from Poirot and be of proper help to Poirot. And Poirot's kind of trying to train Catchpool up to think about things in the right way so that he becomes a better detective. And that is an element of their relationship and the sort of dynamic between them that's been present since the first of my Poirot novels. When I created Catchpool as a character, I knew that I wanted Poirot to kind of train him to be a better detective. And I wanted Catchpool to become a more effective helper to Poirot in each subsequent book.
I love that. And you're training us as well as readers, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
I want to show this cover again. We started talking about it a little bit, but I know Julia is going to give us a little more background on the story without giving away any spoilers. But I love this cover, and you've got a couple different covers going on in the UK and in America.
Yeah, they're always different.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm always pleasantly surprised to see what they've come up with. This one has actually got a different kind of approach in the US from my previous ones. It looks a bit more period, I would say, a bit more retro.
Yeah.
Which is
You picked that up
interesting.
right from the get-go in this story, which is kind of neat. Very
Yeah,
immersive.
So,
Oh, brilliant.
on the retro note, I'd love to tell our readers a little bit about the book that we are discussing. We've had the privilege of reading it, and by the time this episode comes out, it'll be on the shelves, and we're thrilled about that for you. So
Brilliant.
this latest installment in this series, The Last Death of the Year, takes you back to New Year's Eve in 1932. And Poirot has convinced his friend and colleague, Inspector Edward Catchpool, to accompany him to the tiny Greek island of Lamperos to celebrate the holiday with some very good friends. And I say that with emphasis. As it turns out, these are not Poirot's friends, but an odd community of locals living in a dilapidated house. And on New Year's Eve, they play a New Year's resolutions game after dinner. And one written resolution gleefully threatens to perform the last and first death of the year. Hours later, one of the house's residents is found dead on the terrace. In the light of this shocking murder, Poirot reveals to Catchpool the true reason he's brought him to this island, and that's that the life of another community member has been threatened. Now both men are to ensure that this first murder will be the last. Do you have anything that you think our readers should know or anything you want to add to that?
No, that's an accurate summary of the plot. I mean, hopefully readers will pick up on the clue. Well, it's not a clue, but a sort of interesting, noteworthy thing is that the way it's phrased, this murder threat, is that it will be the last and first death of the year rather than first and last, which is what you would expect somebody to say. So why has last been put in front of first? And that is obviously the first question Poirot asks, because he wants to try and work out if there's any way of telling anything more specific about this murder threat so that he can prevent the murder. So last and first, rather than the more conventional arrangement of first and last is the first thing that Poirot thinks, that's strange. I need to know what that means.
We were just talking about planting seeds, and honestly, in the very beginning of the book, there were seeds that I was grasping onto, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to start figuring this out. And it is not often that I am drawn in by the prologue of a book, the first paragraph of prologue of a book. But that's what happened here. And you wrote that December 31st is the perfect day to meet somebody because you're going to hear about their habits and their resolutions. And that really got me thinking throughout the book, how intrinsic are our habits to our identities? And is this a fair way to judge somebody? You know, our habits so part of us that we really can get a good read on people if they start talking to us about them.
Yeah, well, I think on New Year's Eve, certainly if you're anything like me and my family, the subject of resolutions always comes up. Um, and in that conversation, you get to hear and discover not only what people hope they can become, but also what they wish they weren't, And then there's all the discussion of like, oh, come on, you're never going to do that. You always make that resolution, you never stick to it. And it just occurred to me when I was thinking of ideas for the book that if you didn't know anything about a group of people, but you were put into their group when they were having those kind of resolution-y discussions, you might just find out quite a lot about them, because you'd find out not only about their past, but their hopes for their future, how they see themselves versus how others see them. You'd find out an awful lot. And actually, one of the things that I'm so glad you like the prologue, because I really like it as well. One of the things that I love about the prologue is that Catchpool basically says, after he's said, this is a great time to meet people because you find out so much about them via their resolutions. After he said that, he basically says, and actually, I could have just looked at this list of resolutions, and if I'd thought to study it, I could have worked out who the killer was. Poirot could have worked out who the killer was just from looking at the list of everybody's New Year's resolutions. Then he lists the resolutions, and what that means and why he and Poirot could have worked out who the baddies were from that list. But the reader won't know. I was confident that the reader would then look at that list and think, right, I'm going to look at this and work out who the killer is, and not be able to. So that
Guilty.
I was very excited.
Guilty.
I was very excited about that, because I knew then that there would be, and there is, an epilogue at the end of the book in which it's explained exactly what that means and how it works.
Well, you know what I loved about that? And first of all, I say guilty. I really was reading. I was like, okay, I'm gonna figure it out. She said it's right here. And you made the reader a player in the book. So as Catchpool is learning how to be a detective, I felt like we were too. And that part of that interactive component was awesome.
Oh,
So
brilliant. Yeah, no, I loved that too. That was one of my favorite things about the book.
And another thing too, and I say the habits, that concept really came up for me throughout, was that there's a character named Pearl who is a habitual liar, and she owns up to that, and she says that. But interestingly enough, that was not her resolution to change. She didn't care to address that part of her character, I guess, even though it was getting in the way of her love life and tarnishing her reputation. And I'm curious. Can we be aware of habits that we should be changing and just elect to ignore them and not make them part of our, personal awareness?
I think Pearl as a character, it's almost like she might be aware of some of her deficiencies, but she doesn't mind having them because she's so kind of immoral and selfish. If I recall correctly, her resolution is basically get the man I'm in love with to propose to me. So her resolution doesn't have anything about self-improvement in it at all. Now, that actually was inspired by one of my New Year's resolutions. I can't remember which year it was. It was one year.
Who are
I
you
thought,
trying to trap, Sophie?
well, I thought I don't want, the reason I'd never stick to resolutions is because they're all kind of worthy and improving, and no wonder I don't fancy them. So one year I made a resolution to have more manicures and pedicures. And my sister was like, hang on a minute, that can't be your resolution. That's just a thing you want to do. I was like, why can't my resolution be a nice thing? So yeah, I think Pearl, if and when she lies, she's aware of it and she just decides it's fine because whatever she wants in any given moment is the only thing she cares about. And I can't remember the details because it's a while since I wrote the book, but throughout the book, she has regular opportunities when people kind of respond with disapproving shock to her various immoral behaviors and pronouncements. She has various opportunities to look a bit shamefaced in the face of other people's shock. And she just never does. She's like, yeah, what's the problem? Yeah, I want this. So I did that. So she's kind of unshameable because she's just so immoral. She's like beyond morality.
She was a refreshing character for me. I found it amusing and kind of a means to an end person, you
Yeah,
know?
she was a very fun character to write, hugely fun to write.
Now, we had another interesting character, Nash, and he's kind of like a spiritual leader of this group. And I won't go into too much detail, but there was a running theme of forgiveness, or at least
Yeah.
Nash's view of forgiveness throughout this entire story, which, by the way, went very deep on this. And, Nash said that forgiveness should be unconditional and freely given before any other actions are taken, because regardless of forgiveness, the act is done. And this is kind of interesting because, in his view, forgiveness alone will cause somebody to look at their behavior going forward and perhaps change it and act in a different way. And I struggled with this because, that's kind of a hard take on forgiveness. But I wanted to ask you about that because do you think that even if somebody doesn't really forgive someone, is there something about the act of saying that you forgive someone that helps them in their spiritual journey?
I think so. And the reason Nash's philosophy is what it is and is in the book is because I thought of it many years ago. I can't remember, probably about 15 years ago. I had that idea. And I actually do believe it's true, but I would never try and, as Nash does, build a community on it because it's actually impossible if you're a regular human. So I personally could not do that. If someone wrongs me or wrongs somebody I care about, I will rant about them in a aggrieved and bitchy manner, just like a normal person. But at the same time, just purely theoretically, I do believe that if there was unconditional upfront forgiveness for everyone all the time, eventually, if it could be maintained consistently, people would stop or at least massively decrease doing harmful, evil acts.
Yeah. Well, it's
Because
interesting. Oh, go
think,
ahead.
I think fundamentally, when we do evil and harm other people, it comes from our own unprocessed pain. We kind of lash out because someone did that mean thing to us and we never got justice. So we then go and do a mean thing to someone else. So if like people knew that whether they did a horrid thing or a nice thing, they were just going to get love and forgiveness unconditionally, there'd be zero reason for them to do the horrid thing. Now, I
Yeah.
should point out that I have no evidence for this, and I could be completely wrong. Um, but, given how much harm doing there is in the world, I do kind of think, why not try this approach? But then the answer to that is, well, I wouldn't last 5 minutes because when someone told me I had to forgive the person who'd done the wrong thing, I'd be like, no, I hate them. I want to punch them on the nose. So, yeah. So, and this is one of the things that the book shows that, even if Nash's theory is right and it's so great to forgive everything and be totally merciful, once you get to dealing with actual humans, there are resentments, there are lies, there are betrayals, and people end up murdering each other. So it's really, really quite not ideal for Nash. He's trying to build this spiritual community where everyone believes in the, you know, all-encompassing forgiveness. And what ends up happening, they all end up, you know, various members of the community plot to kill each other. So it's not a ringing endorsement for Nash's approach to life. But I do nevertheless think that even though it probably could never work, it theoretically, if humans could pull it off, it would lead to good results. It's a little bit Christ-like, isn't it? I mean, this is why I made it very clear, and it was very important to me that it should be in Nash's mind a version of Christianity. So Nash grew up in a devout Christian family, but then he noticed that as well as the brilliant idea of forgiveness and sins being wiped off your record, as well as that, there was a heavy conditional element, like you have to follow me, you have to repent, you have to try and be good. And he just wanted to take it even further. So he's like a sort of real metaphysical and theological purist who kind of thought, it's all very well Jesus talking about forgiveness, but he's actually imposing quite a few conditions there. And what if we just didn't impose any conditions? Like, there's something quite exciting about the pure form of that idea. But so I very much wanted that to be in the book, but I also wanted to show that the experiment was not a success because, you know, everyone has their very human feelings and pain, and it probably can't work because of what we humans are like as creatures.
Yeah, and
And
I think we have oh, sorry, Julia, I didn't mean to
you're
cut you
good.
off. I was going to say, I think we have a very strong sense of justice and wanting to see justice done, and
Yes.
that accountability element,
Yeah.
wasn't present. And I think as humans, that's almost a need and a want. And I didn't mean
Yes.
to cut you
Well,
off there.
do you know, you probably don't know this, but I have written and published a self-help book called How to Hold a Grudge.
Yes.
And that book is all about this issue. I'm kind of obsessed with this issue of grudges and forgiveness. And one of the things I say in my book is that if we allow ourselves to hold a grudge, which doesn't mean feeling bitter forever, it just means acknowledging that it's valid that we thought that wasn't okay, and that we remember that that thing happened and it wasn't okay with us, and we have our grudge. And I call it in the book a kind of symbolic justice object.
Yeah.
So I have grudges against not against people, but about people. And all it means is I remember that they did a thing that I did not think was okay. And if if I've been able to, I've taken measures to protect myself from future bad behavior of that sort. It doesn't mean I don't forgive them. It doesn't mean I don't still love them or like them. But I allow myself to think I have my grudge about what that person did. And the grudge acts as a symbolic justice object. Whereas if we say to ourselves, must not hold a grudge, must not hold a grudge, must be forgiving, then there's a part of us that resists that, that goes, hang on a minute, a wrong was done to me. And why should I just move on and be smiley and pretend it never happened? So
Yeah.
that's why I am quite positive about holding grudges in the right way. I think it actually allows us to get past our feelings of bitterness because we sort of award ourselves this symbolic justice object in the form of the grudge. So you can see how
First of all,
there's a really close link between that and Nash's community with its ethos of forgiveness.
there have been multiple things you've said where I feel like I should be taking notes. Like I'm sitting here, I'm like, say that again. Like that's amazing.
Well, she
But
has a podcast on that,
I
on
know.
that book of how to hold a grudge. But go
If
on.
you if you're interested in the grudge, I actually invented for the book a way to process justifiable pain, anger, all of that. And I called it the grudge-fold path, which is a reference to obviously the eightfold path in Buddhism. But read the book, How to Hold a Grudge. It's such an unusual self-help book. I'm a big fan of the self-help genre, and I've read all the self-help books, even the ones about problems I don't have, just because I love the genre so much. And they all, at some point, say, never hold a grudge. It's terribly bad for you. And that was why I wrote my book, because I thought it's only bad for you if you do it in the wrong way. And the wrong way is staying bitter and wishing harm on people. That's obviously not good for us. But holding a grudge in the way I do, where we just think about it, decide that it's okay for us to award ourselves a judgment of they did a thing that was not okay, and I am validating my judgment on it and protecting myself and learning from it where necessary. And that is so powerful that it actually makes us more forgiving, not less forgiving. All of that is in the book, which I
That
recommend in an unbiased way, How to Hold a Grudge.
that idea of justice too cropped up in a different way with some of these characters, and I am going to dance around a spoiler as best I can, um, where people acknowledged that this was a forgiving community and decided to take advantage of that. Where they said, I know that whatever I do is going to be forgiven, so I'm going to go ahead and justify
Yeah,
my actions based on that. And I
yeah.
thought that was such an interesting um, perspective on human emotion, I guess.
Yeah, and at the same time, other members of the community genuinely wanted to do better and be good people, and they valued what the community was offering in the way that Nash wanted them to.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's actually a good segue into something else that I really wanted to ask you about. And I feel like the theme of how well do you know a person crops up very often in mysteries and thrillers because, things happen and you either know the perpetrator very well, or, the victim had known this person for 10 years. And here our main detectives don't know any of the suspects ahead of time, although they're part of this community of very good friends. And I'm curious, is it easier to parse out these truths about people's character when you don't know anything about them ahead of time? And in getting to know somebody, are we creating an intrinsic bias that prevents us from seeing who they were when we meet them?
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think there's a good chance that is the case. But I also think it's possibly a bit it's secondary to what I think the main point is, which is that we don't ever really know anyone and we don't ever really know ourselves. I don't believe character is real. So when people say what comes first for you in a novel, plot or character, I say always plot, because what is character? You know, if I change my thoughts and approach to life right now, then I will behave very differently in future from how I've behaved for the last 54 years. Now, most people don't change that radically, but some people do. And I'm just not sure that there is such a thing as character, rather than a collection of behaviors or an accumulation of behaviors driven by a tendency to think a certain way. So, for example, the way I choose to think of it is, because it feels more true, I have a tendency to say, oh, everything's going to be fine, right? I just have that thought crops up in my mind a lot. And sometimes that's a good thing because I take action that then gets a good outcome because I think everything's going to be fine. So I set about making sure that happens. But sometimes it can be a bad thing, like when I think, oh, everything will be fine, I'll definitely catch that train. And my husband says, but the station is 20 minutes away and you're still in your pajamas and the train leaves in 10 minutes. How can everything possibly be fine in those circumstances? And I'm so reluctant to admit that actually everything won't be fine and I will miss the train. I just like go into denial. I'm like, oh, surely everything's fine. And my husband's like, well, not unless you can somehow magically stop the train from leaving the station. So that is a behavior tendency I have, missing trains, because of a thought habit that I have. That's all true. But it feels less true to me to say Sophie's character is such that she always thinks everything will be fine. And I know it sounds like I'm splitting hairs, but I think when it comes to knowing people and knowing ourselves, we are so often surprised by ourselves and other people that I just do wonder, is it possible to know anybody really, truly?
Yeah.
And that's what the whole mystery genre is based on, right? It's like,
Mm.
who is the person? Oh, You may not have seen it, but there's a brilliant documentary. I think it's on Netflix. It's called Unknown Caller, The High School Catfish.
I did watch that.
Right.
Hmm.
And I won't spoiler it. If you haven't watched Unknown Caller, The High School Catfish, please watch it. It is so surprising and gripping. But there's a character in that who we find out sort of halfway through has just done something that, like, no one who knew them, and certainly not everyone who's watched the program up to that point, would have guessed, or it just made no sense. And yet they admitted they did it. And I just think that happens so often. You find out someone's done something and you're like, wow, you would never have thought it of that person. So that's what I mean when I say I'm not sure we ever really properly know anyone.
Yeah,
it's
I,
great.
I thought that documentary was awesome. It was so interesting. And okay, not to go back to Pearl, but she was a very compelling character to me throughout. And she was kind of obsessed with one of the detectives. She's claiming to write poetry about him, and she wants to be in love, and she loves his attributes. She's talking about him to other people. And I was so curious if she was attempting to make herself known, almost in this love bombing way, to deter any suspicion away from her.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
know me, and I'm not like this, and I couldn't have possibly have done this because you know me.
Mm.
And I don't know, was that like purposeful? It was just so interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe every writer would say this, but I'm a very deliberate writer. Every single line that is in the book is there for a reason, and I've looked at it from all angles. So, yeah, every impression that's created is created for a reason that is either intended to get the reader and the detective characters closer to the solution or to act as a kind of red herring so that they are taken further away from it temporarily before finding out something else that leads them closer again, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think really adds to the roller coaster that you experience as a reader because the reader thinks they know what's going on too. And, we're not let in on that secret yet.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Sophie, I wish we could keep you for like 2 hours because I have so many questions and you're talking about splitting hairs. I want to know if Nash would make a distinction between a societal wrong and a personal wrong. But we've kept you
No,
so long, so
he wouldn't. I can tell you
okay.
that he wouldn't. He would think that society's people, whatever the bad act, you just forgive unconditionally,
Interesting.
straight away, always up front.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, again, we could keep you a long time because you have a lot of deep themes running through the story, but we're certainly going to tell our listeners they need to pick up this awesome book, The Last Death of the Year, with this awesome title. And of course, we've got different versions. So when you go online, a couple of them are visible and they're neat. Um, can we just ask you what's on your radar? I know you can maybe give us a little clue
What's on my radar in terms of what I'm reading or
or what's next for you?
what's next? Well, that is a great question. I've just finished the latest in my contemporary mystery series, starring Simon Waterhouse and Charlie Zayler. They're the detective characters, but actually, although they are series characters, the books in which they feature feel more like standalones because they're narrated by a protagonist who is unique to that book in each case. So my latest book in that series is coming out next, and that is called The Opposite of Murder. And I think it's going to be out next year in the US
Excellent.
and indeed in the UK. So it's coming out in January in the UK and I think August in the US, The Opposite of Murder. And the tagline is, what if the only way you can prevent a murder is by confessing to it?
Interesting. I hope you come back on the show to talk about
I would
that one. We
love
just
to.
love talking to you.
I would love to come back if you want
Awesome.
if you want to do a deep dive. I'm happy to do a longer episode.
We love it. We would love that. And in
Great.
the meanwhile, I want to tell our listeners how to find you. You have a great website. It's Sophie Hannah with an H at the end.com. Your books, there's links to other things. There's all kinds of things they can explore there. You're on Facebook, on X. And again, we just want to thank you for coming on the show. It is wonderful talking to you. And we're going to show this cover one more time. And thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Lovely to meet you both.
You as well.
Okay, well, I truly could keep going. Like, I have just a list of things that I have picked out as I was reading this book, and I just found it really, really compelling on all fronts. So that was interesting to me. I wanted to ask her about crimes of passion and all this stuff, and I feel like that's just our like lawyer side coming out. But it was a really fun book, so much personality, and I can't wait for our listeners to, get their hands on that.
Even the Greek island on which it took place was very much a
Right.
part of the whole, setting and scene and very immersive, just kind of like the sea. It was really cool.
Yes.
Well, all right. I want to tell our listeners about some other fantastic authors that we have coming up. Susan Mallory with Otherwise Engaged, Lynn Cullen, When We Were Brilliant, Ryan Steck and Simon Gervais, The Second Son, Liza Palmer, Young Fools, Brad Meltzer with The Viper, James Grappando, The Right to Remain, Allison Brennan, Make It Out Alive, Brooke Fast, To Cage a Wild Bird, Caitlin Rother with Hooked, Kate White is coming back for I Came Back for You, Mariah Blake, They Poison the World, and so many more. I actually can't even list them all because we have so many more coming up. But we are thrilled that you're joining us, and we know why you're tuning in because, again, these authors are here talking about these deep themes and the things they've been thinking about while they were writing. We love it. You can find us on bookstormpodcast.com. We're on X, on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel, and just keep on coming back, readers and listeners.